In this video we want to look at the vowels of the Hebrew language. Now, by and large, Hebrew vowels were not written as part of the text of ancient Hebrew. For that matter, if you pick up a Hebrew newspaper in Jerusalem today, you won't find the vast majority of the vowels written. It'd be like if we were to take an English book and take all of the A, E, I, O, and U's out of it, and you would have to try to figure out exactly what words you were looking at simply by the consonants. Now, this is not as hard as it might seem if you're used to that kind of way of doing it. And so a Jew reading the Hebrew newspaper in Jerusalem is going to have no problem figuring out which word they're looking at. The vowels were there, of course, in terms of pronunciation. You can't have language without vowels. It's just they weren't written when they actually wrote down the consonants. And so now the Hebrew Bible that you would buy today will have the consonants almost always written underneath. They're called points. The Masoretes in the Middle Ages, the 900s and so forth, added the points underneath and several other marks so that you could tell what word you're looking at. So the same three consonants in a word could turn out to be one thing or another depending on the vowels. Again, if you know Hebrew, you kind of intuitively know how to fill in the sounds. But we don't if we're beginning Hebrew students. And so the Hebrew Bible, very helpfully for most of us, puts the points, the vowels, underneath, which creates a kind of a complex way of reading because you kind of have to zigzag up and down, up and down. So you read the consonant on the right, then you come to the point under it, the vowel under it, then you come back up to the consonant, one over to the left, and then you go down under it to see the vowel that comes after it, and then you come up to the left and to the next letter, and down, and so forth, zigzag, zigzag, up, down, trying to read it and get a sense of the points. So now the vowels aren't always written under. Most of the time the Masoretes put the vowels underneath. There is one place where they put the vowel on top, as we'll find out. Well, that's a little bit of a preface to Hebrew vowels. It is a completely different way of thinking about vowels than in English. But let's dive right in. Okay, vowels, Hebrew vowels. They're usually written under the letter, as I just said. And so here are some I vowels and E vowels. I's and E's tend to be grouped together phonetically, sound-wise, when we're talking the Hebrew language. So if there's one dot, that circle there represents a letter. Could be any letter. Could be a bait, could be a gamma, gimel, could be a lamed, could be a tav. The circle of dots represents a letter. I didn't put a letter there because I didn't want you to think that the Hirik only appears under whatever letter I put there. And so the circle of dots means fill in the blank with any Hebrew consonant there. So the dot under almost any Hebrew consonant. The dot underneath there is a Hirik, which is transliterated as an I and pronounced E. Now I know that seems counterintuitive for an English speaker that you would have the letter I and that it would be pronounced E. Why not transliterate it with the letter E? Don't ask questions like that. You'll just go insane. We'll have to lock you up. That's just the way it is. Actually, that's true in many languages, and it's true sometimes in English. I mean, complain about English if you're going to complain. What about the word machine? That I in machine is pronounced E. Why? Why is it that way? So, physician, heal thyself. Just memorize it, that the Hirik is transliterated with an I, and it's pronounced E. And it is a single dot under a consonant. Two dots under a consonant is the tsere. The tsere is transliterated with a long E, and it's pronounced A. Again, don't ask why. You'll drive yourself crazy. Just memorize it. Tsere is pronounced A and transliterated with a long E. Three dots under a consonant is a sagol, and that is a short E pronounced E. Now that one actually makes sense to us. So you have three kind of I sounds here. I/E sounds here. So you have the single dot, which is the chirik, transliterated with an I and pronounced E. You have two dots, which is the tsere, transliterated with a long E and pronounced A. And then you have three dots, like a bowling pin there, the sagol, which is a short E, pronounced E. So there you have the I/E sounds, I/E vowels in Hebrew. Okay, let's talk about the A vowels. The short A is the patach, and it is transliterated with an A with nothing else, and it's pronounced A. Now it's probably a shorter A than this one, the kametz, which is looks like a little T underneath the consonant, and is transliterated with a long A. And you might say, well, what's the difference between the short A and the long A? Well, English speakers are not very good at this is a sound distinction we just don't get very well. It has to do with how long the sound is held out, and basically I'm by me telling you that they're both pronounced ah, I'm basically telling you to give up trying to make a distinction between the way you as an English speaker pronounce this. Basically, the patak is a shorter sound. It's used in closed syllables where you have a structure something like consonant, vowel, consonant. So because it's closed, you don't have as long to hold. So if I say pat or pot, because I've got to get to the T, the middle sound doesn't hold as long, and so it's considered short. By the way, in our well, never mind. That comes later. Okay, so the kametz is a long A sound. It tends to be in an open syllable, a consonant vowel or CV situation. The patak is short, CVC, where you have a closed syllable. This is not necessarily important to life, but it is part of the game here. And so anyway, patak, short A, kametz, long A. The A vowels, A points. Okay, let's get to the O and U consonants. I mean vowels. The cholim is an exception to the most of them written underneath rule. So here you can see that the cholim is actually written above the letter that follows, and that'll take some getting used to. So you'll have a consonant, and then the dot on top of the next consonant tells you that you need to put a long O after whatever consonant you just had. So take the name of God, Elohim, begins with an aleph and then has a cholim after the lamed, Elohim. So it's transliterated with a long O, an O with a macron over the top, and it's pronounced O. Kibbutz is a short sound, a short U, no line over the top, kibbutz, and it's pronounced U. And so you would find this, say, in a closed syllable. It's a short vowel. And then I know that you just saw the kametz, and we said it was a long A, and you thought to yourself, that's fine. But now we have another kametz, a kametz katuf, that is a short O, and it's pronounced aw. And you're thinking, what in the world is up with this language? And you would be right, of course. How do you tell the difference between a kametz gadol, a long A in an open syllable, and a kametz katuf, a short O, which would be in a closed syllable? Well, I just told you. The way you tell the difference is because a long A is always in an open syllable, whereas the short O is always in a closed syllable, in a consonant vowel consonant situation. And I'll more on that as we go along. Just kind of suspend fulfillment for a little while here, suspend gratification, and hang on until it begins to sink in practice. Shavas. What is a shava? Well, the simple shava is a very short sound. It's written like a colon underneath a consonant, so it's just a very short sound. This tends to be, for example, the farther away you are from the accent, the more likely the sound is to diminish, the amount of breath, because you have to you kind of have to save some breath for the accented syllable, the stressed syllable. So the farther away you are from the stressed syllable, the less sound you have. So the Shiva is kind of it's not much sound at all. Now, there are two kinds of Shivas of this kind. There is the vocal one, where you say the sound There's also a silent Shiva that basically says this syllable is over, and you only use that silent Shiva when you're closing a closed syllable. And so the reason I'm telling you this in part is because this is a potential clue to understand whether a kamates is a long A kamates or a short O kamates. If a kamates is followed by a consonant with a Shiva under it, then there's an excellent chance that you're looking at a kamats katuf, that is the short O, because a kamates under a consonant and a Shiva under the next consonant, probably that Shiva under the next consonant is closing off a closed syllable and saying, we're done here. And so a kamates followed by a consonant with a Shiva under it is a good hint that you're looking at the short O, the kamats katuf. A kamates under a consonant and a different vowel under the next consonant is a good indicator that you're probably looking at a long A kamates. I know it's all very confusing, but you don't have to get it the first time. In fact, if you get it the fifth time, that'll be just fine. Now there are also some compound Shivas. They're all vocal. So there is the katef patak, the katef kamates, and the katef sagol. These are compound Shivas because they are a Shiva with one of the other vowels that I've mentioned. So the katef patak is a Shiva with a patak. The katef kamates is a Shiva with that short O, and then the katef sagol is a Shiva with the sagol. And you can see these correspond to the three classes of vowels: the A kinds of vowels, the O, U kinds of vowels, and the E, I kinds of vowels. We're going to pronounce them just like a patak. We're going to pronounce the second one like a kamates katuf, and we're going to pronounce the third one like a sagol. We're going to transliterate them with a little short mark over the top. Why do we need these, you might ask? Well, just for your own enrichment, there are certain consonants that are called gutturals. They involve the throat when you pronounce them. The aleph is like that, aleph. The ayin, ayin. That was exaggerated, a little dramatic. I'm sorry. What are the other gutturals? The hay and the chait. They don't do simple Shivas. And so if you have a situation where you would normally have a Shiva, those gutturals are going to open up the sound a little bit by making a almost A, an almost O, and an almost E. And so those are the situations where you get the compound Shiva. Again, if you're taking a Hebrew for Ministry course, you don't need to know all those rules. Those are rules that are interesting if you want to go the whole way with Hebrew. But you don't need to know them for a Hebrew Tools kind of course. There were a couple of three instances where Hebrew was beginning to write vowel letters. Now, Hebrew never went through with it. The Hebrew language never went all the way to create vowels to put in the main text. It never went the full way. However, there are three instances where you have consonants, that is letters of the alphabet, that were put in the text most of the time, not always. Sometimes they were there, sometimes Hebrew never got consistent, and there was never a great grammarian to standardize the Hebrew language. But there were some instances where Hebrew speakers and writers, Hebrew writers, would put in a hint that a long vowel went somewhere. And so we call three consonants mothers of reading, matres lectionis. We call them these helps, they're helpers, to say, hey, there is a long vowel here. And let me, hold on, if you don't understand, wait till I've gone through them and then we'll revisit it. So first there's the holum vav. Now there's a consonant vav, but it's not serving as a consonant. It has a holum on top of it. And it's that holum there, I mean that vav, is not telling you that the V or the W is there. The holum is there to say, because remember the point wasn't there in ancient Hebrew. And so the vav was there to say, hey, a long O goes here. We wouldn't have needed the vav if they had points back in ancient Hebrew to say that the vowel was there. But apparently it was convenient at some point to start putting a holum in the text to say, hey, a long vowel, a long O goes here. And so we transliterate that as a O with a hat on top. Sometimes when you do a full transliteration, you'll not only see the O with a hat on top, but maybe a little superscript V or W, as if to say, there is a vav here, but it doesn't count because it doesn't. All it's doing is it's a piggyback for the holum. It is not a consonant vav. It is simply a look up here, look up here. Here is a long O. The vav is not a consonant in this case. Now sometimes the vav is a consonant. Again, this Hebrew is incredibly complicated. You've got to get out your paper bag and take a few deep breaths, and then just chill. You'll get it eventually. But so some vavs are consonants, but some vavs, when they have a holum on top, are mothers of reading. They're helpers to say a long O goes here. The vav can also piggyback something called a Shrek. This is not Shrek, the character, animated character, but Shrek, which is a long oo sound. We transliterate with a U with a hat on top of it. And again, if you want, you could put the teeny little W or V for the vav as a superscript, like you were squaring the U, except you're putting a V or a W there, depending on how you want to transliterate the holum. When you put the dot in the middle, then it's probably a Shrek. Now the vav doesn't double. There is no such thing as a doubled vav. I think I'm remembering that right. I hope I'm remembering that right. I may not be remembering that right. But basically I'm trying to say that when you see the dot there, well, basically here's how you tell that it's a vowel. If there's no other vowel written under the previous consonant, then you know that it's just being a Shrek. Because if it was a doubled vav, the consonant right in front of it would have a vowel, a short vowel underneath it. Anyway, so Shrek, long U, oo. Finally, the Hirik can also serve as a piggyback for a long I, E. So you'll have a dot, a Hirik under the previous consonant, followed by a yod, and there won't be any vowel under the yod. That'll be a clue that you're looking at a yod that's a piggyback, not a yod that is a real consonant. And you're going to transliterate the Hirik yod with a I with a hat on top of it. So the vav and the yod were beginning to serve as hints of long vowels in the Hebrew language. Like Hebrew never went all the rest of the way and came up with consonants for the other vowels. But in these three instances, the vav and the yod were sometimes used, inconsistently used, to signify that a long vowel sound went there. Like I said, not always. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not there. And the Masoretes put the holum in, or the for the Shrek, it's going to have to. Well, actually, sometimes the Shrek can be written defectively with a kibbutz. So even in the case of the Shrek, you can't count on these mothers of readings being there, even when there's a long. So there can be a long vowel without these being there, and sometimes they were written there, and they weren't needed. And I'm not going to go into detail on that. So the Hebrew language is very inconsistent when it comes to the appearance or non-appearance of these helps. So you're going to have to let go of your J-ness. Greek is the J language in terms of Myers-Briggs. Hebrew is for P's, for perceivers, who can just flow with it. So these are the Hebrew vowels.